Stalked on the Appalachian Trail. Hunted Trapline of Hikers and Death Chapter 1. The Disappearances. The Appalachian Trail has seen many hikers over the years, adventurous souls seeking to escape the noise of city life, to find solace or to challenge themselves. For most, it's a journey of self-discovery, but for a select few, it becomes a voyage they never return from. Meredith Cole adjusted the straps of her backpack and gazed down the beaten path that stretched before her, a line of dirt cutting through the verdant forest. The sun, filtered through the canopy of leaves above, gave the morning an ethereal glow. Meredith had always found the trail a place of peace. It was a respite from her busy life as a reporter in Roanoke, Virginia. But this morning, her reasons for being here were far from tranquil. The town of Damascus had been abuzz with rumors for weeks now. First, it was just a murmur. A hiker not returning to camp, presumed to have lost his way. Then, there were more, each vanishing without a trace. No gear left behind, no clues, no notes, no signs of a struggle. Simply gone. Shivering despite the morning's warmth, Meredith remembered the most recent account, a couple from Marion who had decided to traverse the Highlands for their honeymoon. Only the bride returned, traumatized, her once bright eyes now clouded with an impenetrable dread. The tales she whispered had been written off as shock-induced hallucinations. But Meredith knew there was more to it. Following her instincts, she'd taken a short sabbatical from work and decided to investigate. Pulling out her voice recorder, she muttered, "Day 1, investigation into the Appalachian disappearances." The town of Damascus was her first stop. Meredith hoped to interview the locals, gather accounts, maybe even find someone who had seen something. She'd visited the Hiker's Rest, a local inn that primarily catered to trailgoers. Over a cup of coffee, she'd overheard snippets of conversation from a nearby table. An old man, his skin resembling a wrinkled map, was talking to a couple of younger hikers. "They say when the raven mocks, you ought not be on the trail," he whispered, an ominous tone coating every syllable. The young woman across from him rolled her eyes. "Enough with the tales, old man. It's just stories to scare kids." But Meredith wasn't so sure. She decided to approach him. "Excuse me, sir," she began cautiously. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm looking into the recent disappearances. Would you be willing to share what you know?" The old man looked her up and down, his eyes sharp. Finally, he nodded. I'll tell you, but only if you promise not to make light of it. These are old stories, but they have roots in truth." For the next hour, Meredith listened, enraptured, as the old man recounted tales passed down through generations. Tales of a creature that could take any form it wished, that lured hikers deep into the forest, never to return. He spoke of an entity that fed off the heartbeats of the living, leaving no mark, no trace of its meal. The raven mocker, he had whispered, the very mention of its name making the lights in the inn seem to dim. That's what our ancestors called it. Meredith's journalistic instincts were in overdrive. This could be the story of her career, but she had to tread carefully. The line between legend and reality was often blurred in towns like this. Leaving the inn, she made her way to the local sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniels was a burly man, with a bald head and a demeanor that suggested he had little patience for tales of the supernatural. "Meredith, I respect your work," he began, his voice gruff. "But this isn't some city crime. People go missing on the trail all the time. It's vast, wild. Nature can be unforgiving." But when she pressed, mentioning the raven mocker, he paused. "I've heard the tales. But I work with evidence, not legends." Meredith wasn't easily deterred. She decided to spend the night in town, planning to start her hike early the next morning. That night, However, sleep eluded her. Every rustle of the wind, every creak of the inn, seemed to whisper the creature's name, Raven Mocker. Dawn found Meredith at the trailhead. Armed with her camera, voice recorder, and a determination to uncover the truth, she embarked on her journey. Hours turned into days as she interviewed hikers, gathered stories, and ventured deeper into the trail. But as the landscape shifted, so did the atmosphere. There was an undeniable heaviness in the air, a sense that she was being watched. One evening, as the sun's last rays dipped below the horizon, Meredith set up camp near Mount Rogers. That night, as the cold settled in and the woods were blanketed in an eerie silence, a distant, mocking call of a raven echoed through the trees. Chapter 2. The raven's mock. The ghostly raven call echoed again, more insistent this time, raking over Meredith's nerves like sharpened claws. The sound seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. She reached for her flashlight, casting an artificial beam of light around the campsite, the harsh light cutting through the inky darkness of the surrounding forest. Every journalist instinct told her to record this, to document everything. She fumbled for her voice recorder and pressed the record button. Night 2 near Mount Rogers. There's something out here. Her breath turned to mist as the night grew colder. The raven's call persisted, sounding less like a bird and more like a mournful lament, a mocking reminder of the legends she had heard. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the sound ceased, replaced by a stifling silence. The kind of silence that wasn't just an absence of sound but felt like a presence in itself. Meredith tried to calm her racing heart, reminding herself that she was on the trail to uncover the truth, not become one of its mysteries. Drawing her sleeping bag tighter around her, she decided to try and get some rest. But sleep was elusive. Every time she began to drift off, unsettling dreams took hold. Dreams of shadowy figures lurking just beyond her campsite, of heartbeats echoing in the darkness, of hands reaching for her only to disappear into mist. When dawn finally broke, Meredith was exhausted but determined. Packing up her camp, she continued along the trail, every sense alert. Mid-morning, she reached the Grayson Highlands State Park. As she walked, the vast meadows and montane forests seemed to change character. What was majestic and welcoming during the day felt ominous and concealing of dark secrets under the shadowy veil of dusk. At a rest stop, Meredith met a group of hikers who were discussing the disappearances. The mood was tense as they exchanged stories. "I heard it was a bear," one young man whispered. "No way," retorted another. "Bears don't just take people without leaving a trace." An older woman with silver hair tied back in a braid looked pensive. "It's the land," she said softly, drawing the group's attention. "The land remembers, and sometimes it takes." Meredith approached, her journalist's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean, the land takes?" The woman, who introduced herself as Moira, was a local and had been hiking the Appalachian Trail every year for decades. "My grandmother used to tell me tales," Moira began, her voice a hushed whisper, of times when the land would hunger, when it would beckon to those it wished to claim. "They say the raven mocker is its guardian, its enforcer." Meredith felt a chill, the words echoing the same tales she'd heard in Damascus. "Have you ever seen it?" She ventured to ask. Moira looked around, as if fearing the very trees would overhear. "Once, years ago, when I was a young girl. I was hiking with my brother. We had set up camp for the night. I remember waking up to a feeling, like a weight pressing down on me. I looked around and saw a figure in the distance. It seemed to shift, sometimes man, sometimes beast. And the eyes, cold, white, unfeeling." Moira paused, taking a shaky breath. "I tried to scream, to warn my brother, but no sound came out." The next thing I remember is waking up in the morning. My brother. He was gone. No trace, nothing. The group was silent, the weight of Moira's words settling over them. Meredith reached out, touching the older woman's arm gently. I'm so sorry, she murmured. Moira nodded. I've come back every year, hoping, searching, but he's never returned. Determined to find some evidence, some clue to the mysteries of the trail, Meredith continued her journey. As evening approached, she found herself near the vantage point of Chestnut Knob. The view was breathtaking. A vast expanse of Virginia's loftiest valley sprawled out before her. But the beauty of the scene did nothing to alleviate the growing sense of dread. That night, she set up camp near the viewpoint. As darkness descended, Meredith thought she heard footsteps, soft and deliberate, circling her tent. Gripping her flashlight, she mustered the courage to unzip the tent and look outside. The beam of her flashlight cut through the dark, revealing nothing. Just the trees, swaying slightly in the breeze, their shadows dancing ominously on the forest floor. But then, something caught her eye, a brief glint, a reflection perhaps. Like the gleam of white eyes watching from the shadows. Heart pounding, Meredith retreated back into her tent, double-checking the zippers. She felt vulnerable. A flimsy piece of fabric the only barrier between her and the vast wilderness outside. She took deep breaths, trying to steady herself. It's just your imagination, she whispered. There's no such thing as the raven mocker. But as the night wore on, the mocking call of the raven sounded once more, chilling her to the bone. The haunting refrain was joined by another sound, the unmistakable thump of a heartbeat, growing louder and closer with every passing moment. Chapter 3. Shattered illusions. Morning light streamed through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. Meredith lay in her tent, the memories of the previous night's terror still fresh. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, seemed to echo with menace. Still, the journalist within her resisted the temptation to flee. She needed answers. She packed up her camp and decided to head towards Paris Mountain. The iconic viewpoint of Angel's Rest awaited her, and she hoped the breathtaking scenery would provide a much-needed distraction. As she made her way through the forest, the eerie beauty of the Appalachian Trail tried to soothe her jangled nerves. Ancient trees towered above, their boughs whispering secrets of centuries past. Glimpses of wildlife, a fleeting deer, a curious squirrel, reminded her of the life that thrived in these woods. Yet the oppressive weight of being watched never left her. Every so often, a rustle from the underbrush or a snapped twig in the distance would send her heart racing. And there was that unnerving silence, where even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Reaching a clearing, Meredith decided to stop for a quick snack. The sun bathed the area in warm light, providing a brief respite from her fears. As she rummaged through her backpack, she noticed something odd, a series of deep gouges on a nearby tree trunk, almost as if something had clawed at it. Looking around, she found more trees bearing the same marks, forming a circle around the clearing. Her heart skipped a beat. What could cause such marks? Suddenly, a sharp, keening wail shattered the tranquility. Meredith froze, straining her ears. It sounded again, closer this time, a mournful lament echoing from the depths of the forest. Goosebumps rose on her skin as she recalled Moira's story. Gathering her belongings, Meredith hastened her pace, desperate to reach the relative safety of Angel's Rest. The ascent up Paris Mountain was grueling. With every step, Meredith felt as if the weight of the mountain pressed against her, as if the land itself was warning her away. But she pushed on, driven by a mix of determination and fear. Late afternoon found her standing atop Angel's Rest. The view was spectacular, with the ancient New River winding its way below, its waters sparkling in the golden light. Meredith took a moment to marvel at the natural beauty before her. She set up her camera, capturing the scene for her documentary. As she reviewed the footage, something caught her eye, a fleeting shadow at the edge of the frame, moving with an unnatural gait. Zooming in, she could make out a silhouette, a tall, hulking figure, partially obscured by the trees. Its form seemed to shift, shimmering and indistinct. Panic welled up as she remembered the descriptions of the raven mocker. Heart pounding, she scanned the area but saw no sign of the mysterious figure. A gust of wind howled through the trees, sending a chill down her spine. Feeling exposed, Meredith quickly packed her equipment and started her descent, hoping to find a more sheltered spot to camp. Dusk was settling in by the time she found a suitable location. Exhausted, she set up her tent and made a small campfire, the flames casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on her mind. What was she chasing? Was it merely local folklore, or was there something truly sinister stalking the Appalachian Trail? The night wore on, and as the fire reduced to glowing embers, a distant sound reached Meredith's ears, the soft thumping of a heartbeat. Her own heart raced as she recalled the previous night. The sound grew louder, closer, as if echoing from all directions. She fumbled for her flashlight, illuminating the area. And then she saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the campfire's glow, its form constantly shifting. One moment it appeared as a tall, dark shadow with piercing white eyes. The next it seemed to flicker and transform, taking on the aspect of different animals. Its gaze bore into her, cold and calculating. She felt as if it was seeing right through her, into her very soul. Unable to move, unable to scream, Meredith could only watch in horror as the figure stepped into the light, revealing its true form. It was like nothing she had ever seen, a grotesque amalgamation of man and beast, its features constantly in flux. The heartbeat, now deafening, seemed to resonate from the creature itself. As it reached out, its fingers elongating into wicked claws, a sudden, brilliant flash of light blinded Meredith. The deafening roar of a gunshot echoed through the forest. The creature let out an agonized scream and recoiled. Blinking away the spots in her vision, Meredith saw a figure emerging from the trees, Moira, holding a smoking rifle. The raven mocker, injured but not defeated, let out a guttural growl and retreated into the shadows, disappearing from sight. Moira rushed over, her face a mask of determination. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Meredith, still in shock, nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "We need to move," Moira said urgently. "It won't stay away for long." Together, the two women packed up the camp and set off, the weight of the forest secrets pressing in from all sides. The raven mocker might be a legend, but its threat was all too real. And Meredith was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Chapter 4. Old whispers in new ears. The dense canopy of trees obscured the moon, casting the forest into an almost impenetrable darkness. Meredith and Moira moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. Every so often, they would pause, listening intently for any sign of their pursuer. But the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, carrying with it the cold bite of impending winter. As the hours wore on, fatigue began to set in. Meredith's mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who was Moira, really? Why had she come to Meredith's aid? And what was the true nature of the creature that now hunted them? Finally, Moira signaled for a break, leading Meredith to a small clearing where the remnants of an old campfire lay. They sat down, backs against a large boulder, catching their breath. "You're not from around here, are you?" Meredith finally asked, her voice shaky. Moira chuckled softly. I've been on these trails longer than most, but no, I wasn't born here. My family has ties to this place. Old ties. There was a haunted look in Moira's eyes, and for a moment, Meredith saw a glimpse of the weight this woman carried. I know about the Raven Mocker, Moira began, her voice barely above a whisper. I've known about it since I was a child. My grandmother used to tell me stories, warnings, really. She said our family had a debt, and that one day, it would come to collect. Meredith's eyes widened. A debt? To the Raven Mocker? Moira nodded. According to family lore, one of our ancestors made a pact with the creature. In exchange for power and longevity, they promised it something. But they reneged on that deal, and ever since, it's hunted us, seeking what was promised. The gravity of Moira's words settled over Meredith. This was no mere legend. It was a generational curse, one that Moira was now embroiled in. But there was more to the story, there had to be. Why is it attacking hikers? Meredith asked, her journalistic instincts taking over. Moira sighed. I don't have all the answers. But I suspect it's looking for something. Maybe someone. The hikers, the missing people. They might be collateral damage in its search. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Meredith considered the gravity of the situation. She had come to the Appalachian Trail seeking a story, but now she was part of it. The lines between observer and participant had blurred, and she was caught in a web of ancient feuds and dark pacts. Determined to break the tension, Meredith changed the topic. How did you know where to find me? Moira smiled ruefully. I've been tracking the Raven Mocker. When I heard about your documentary and your interest in the local legends, I knew it would come for you. It's drawn to those who seek it out. And the gunshot? How did you know it would work? Moira's expression darkened. It's not the first time I've faced it. The bullet was silver, blessed by a Cherokee shaman. It's one of the few things that can harm it. The weight of their situation settled heavily on Meredith. This wasn't just a story. It was a battle for survival. But Moira's presence was a comfort. Here was someone who knew the creature, who had faced it before and lived to tell the tale. We need to keep moving, Moira said, rising to her feet. We need to find a safe place to hide until dawn. The duo continued their journey, moving stealthily through the forest. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the canopy, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Its wooden boards were worn and weathered, but it seemed like a safe enough refuge. Inside, the cabin was sparse, with a thick layer of dust covering everything. Cobwebs adorned the corners, and the air was musty. But it was shelter, and that was what mattered. Meredith and Moira barricaded the door and settled in. Exhaustion overcame them, and soon, they were both asleep. Meredith's dreams were troubled. She saw the Raven Mocker, its form shifting and changing, always watching. She was back at Angel's Rest, the creature advancing on her, its intentions clear. But this time, there was no Moira to save her. Just as the creature was about to strike, she awoke with a start. The cabin was silent, save for Moira's even breathing. Meredith got up, peering out of a cracked window. The sun was high in the sky, its rays filtering through the trees. The danger, it seemed, had passed. But as Meredith would soon discover, the true horror was only just beginning. For the Raven Mocker was not the only secret the Appalachian Trail held, and the depths of its mysteries were darker and more ancient than she could ever have imagined. In the shadows, unseen eyes watched, waiting for the right moment to strike. The game of cat and mouse had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 5. Whispers of the past. The morning light gave the cabin an eerie glow, with beams of sun filtering through gaps in the wooden boards. Meredith cautiously made her way to the door, prying it open slightly to peer outside. The forest was alive with the morning sounds of birds chirping and the distant rustling of wildlife. "We seem to be safe, for now," Meredith whispered to Moira, who was now stirring. Moira gave a slight nod, pulling herself into a sitting position. "Daylight is our friend. The raven mocker, like many creatures of old, is bound by certain rules. The light of day weakens it. But come dusk." Her voice trailed off, the implication clear. Meredith looked around the dilapidated cabin. "What is this place?" "An old homestead," Moira replied. "Many families once lived in these woods, before the legends and disappearances drove them away. This place," she pointed to the ground, "is built on Cherokee land. These forests are their ancestral homes, and with it come many secrets." As the duo explored the cabin, Meredith stumbled upon an old leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was a scrawling cursive. It seemed to be a diary of one of the cabin's previous inhabitants. "This might have some answers," Meredith mused, flipping through the pages. The entries spoke of daily life, the challenges of living in the wilderness, but as she continued reading, the tone grew darker. There were mentions of strange occurrences, of eerie cries in the night, of livestock found mutilated. And then there were the disappearances, people vanishing without a trace, their last known locations always near the trail. One entry, dated from over a century ago, stood out. It read, "The woods are alive. The elders speak of an old pact, a deal with a dark entity. They say it is the raven mocker, a creature of deceit and death. It has taken many, including my own beloved Sarah. I have heard its chilling cries, seen its shadowy form flitting between the trees. The elders say it seeks something taken from it long ago. I fear for our lives, for our souls. The raven mocker is near." Meredith felt a chill run down her spine. "Moira," she called out, handing over the journal. Moira's face turned ashen as she read. "The pact," she murmured. "It's been hunting for so long." A realization dawned on Meredith. "Moira, if the raven mocker is bound by ancient rules, maybe there's a way to stop it. We need to find out what it wants, what was taken from it." Moira looked up, determination in her eyes. "Then we need to find the Cherokee elders. They hold the keys to the past." The two set out, following old paths that Moira seemed to know instinctively. The journey was arduous, with dense underbrush and steep inclines. But after several hours, they reached a secluded clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone circle, its rocks covered in moss and etched with symbols. "The heart of Cherokee land," Moira whispered. "The elders meet here during sacred ceremonies." As if on cue, a group of elderly Cherokee men and women stepped out from the shadows of the trees, their expressions somber. The oldest among them, a woman with deep wrinkles and piercing eyes, stepped forward. "You seek answers," she stated, not a question but a declaration. Moira nodded. "We need to know about the pact. About the raven mocker." The elder closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Many generations ago, a chief, in his arrogance, sought to harness the power of the spirits. He made a deal with the raven mocker, offering it a sacred relic in exchange for power. But he betrayed the creature, hiding the relic and banishing it. Enraged, the raven mocker swore vengeance, not just on the chief, but on all who live in these lands. Meredith swallowed hard. "The relic. What is it?" "A stone," the elder replied. "The heartstone of the Cherokee. It is said to contain the essence of our people, our connection to this land. And if we return it? Meredith pressed. The elder looked grave. It may appease the creature. But the stone is hidden, protected by ancient magic. Moira took a deep breath. Then we must find it. Before more lives are lost. The elder nodded, handing Moira a small pouch. This will help guide you. But beware, the path is treacherous. And the Ravenmocker will be watching. As Meredith and Moira set out once again, they knew the stakes had never been higher. The answers lay in the past, in ancient rituals and hidden relics. And somewhere, in the shadows, the Ravenmocker waited, its hunger for revenge as insatiable as ever. Chapter 6. The Heartstone's echo rain began to pour as Meredith and Moira made their way deeper into the forest. Every droplet seemed to amplify the silence, with only the occasional distant rumble of thunder giving voice to the heavens. Each step they took was weighed down by mud, making their progress agonizingly slow. From the pouch the elder had given them, Moira extracted a delicate silver compass. However, instead of pointing north, the needle swayed erratically, seemingly responding to something unseen. This will lead us to the Heartstone, Moira whispered, clutching the compass tightly. Meredith nodded, her gaze fixed on their path. The forest seemed different now, more alive. Shadows moved with intent, and the whispers of the trees seemed to carry messages of warning. Suddenly, a piercing cry echoed through the forest, chilling them to the bone. They both knew instinctively. The Ravenmocker was near. We must keep moving, Moira urged, quickening her pace. As they trudged on, the compass began to glow faintly, its luminescence casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. Its needle pointed them towards a dense thicket, beyond which lay an ancient cave. Engraved above the entrance were symbols similar to those on the stone circle, hinting at the treasure within. This is it, Meredith breathed, feeling a mix of dread and hope. But before they could proceed, an ominous figure appeared before the cave's entrance. Not the Ravenmocker, but a human, old and bent, his eyes hollow with years of torment. You seek the Heartstone, he rasped, his voice like grinding stone. We aim to return it and end the Ravenmocker's reign of terror, Meredith replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The old man chuckled, a sound devoid of mirth. I too sought to appease the beast, long ago. Yet, here I stand, cursed to guard the stone for eternity. Moira stepped forward. We have the elder's blessing. Let us pass. The guardian stared at them, his gaze penetrating their very souls. Many have tried, and all have failed. The Heartstone is protected by trials, tests of courage, intellect, and spirit. If you fail, you too shall join me in this eternal vigil. Determined, Meredith and Moira accepted the challenge. The first trial lay in a chamber filled with mirrors. Each reflected a different moment from their past, some painful, some joyous. But among them was one mirror that showed the way forward. Using their combined knowledge and intuition, they identified the mirror reflecting the night they first met, a beacon in their shared journey. The second chamber was filled with an intricate maze of ropes and pulleys. A puzzle that required sharp intellect and dexterity. Working in tandem, using Moira's knowledge of ancient mechanisms and Meredith's analytical mind, they successfully navigated the contraption, unlocking the door to the final chamber. Here, they were met with a vision of horror. Friends and loved ones, ensnared in twisted vines, their faces contorted in pain. From the shadows, the Ravenmocker's voice taunted them, feeding on their fear. They suffer because of you, it hissed. Tears streamed down Meredith's face as she saw her younger brother, lost years ago, trapped in the monstrous plant's grasp. Moira, too, was tormented by the sight of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her parents' demise. Yet, amid their anguish, they remembered the elder's words. This was a trial of spirit. Drawing deep from within, they channeled their energy, focusing not on their fears but on their shared mission. With a collective shout, the illusion shattered, revealing the true prize, the Heartstone. Radiating an ethereal light, it pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. As Meredith reached out to take it, the Guardian appeared once more. "You have proven your worth," he acknowledged, his form beginning to dissipate, finally freed from his cursed duty. With the Heartstone in their possession, they retraced their steps, each heartbeat echoing the urgency of their task. The Raven Mocker was still out there, and the final confrontation was imminent. The storm intensified as they emerged from the forest, a reflection of the battle that lay ahead. But with the Heartstone's power and their unwavering resolve, they were ready to face the darkness and put an end to the nightmare that had plagued the Appalachian Trail for generations. Chapter 7. The Raven's Lair. The clouds painted a slate gray over the Appalachian landscape. They had found the Heartstone, but Meredith and Moira understood the greater challenge lay ahead. The dense trees of the trail seemed to close in around them, a constant reminder of the omnipresent danger. The Heartstone pulsed in Meredith's hand, cold yet comforting, its glow dimmed under a cloth wrapping. The compass that once led them to the Heartstone now pointed in a new direction. "It's guiding us to where the Raven Mocker resides," Moira whispered, eyeing the instrument. Their path led deeper into the forest, to a place few dared tread. Hours passed, the shadows lengthened, and an unnatural mist enveloped them. The fog was so dense, they could barely see a few feet ahead. Yet, the compass remained their unwavering guide. A rustling in the distance caught their attention, followed by hushed whispers that seemed to come from all directions. The fog began to form shapes, shadowy figures that darted in and out of their vision. Moira and Meredith tightened their grip on their belongings, moving back to back in a defensive stance. From the mist, villagers emerged, their eyes hollow, bearing expressions of pain and despair. Among them, Meredith recognized a face, her younger brother. He reached out, a silent plea on his lips, but his eyes betrayed no recognition. These were the lost souls, trapped by the Raven Mocker, forever wandering in torment. "We cannot help them, not yet," Moira said firmly, pulling Meredith along. They continued, the phantoms of the past urging them forward, reminding them of the gravity of their mission. Emerging from the fog, they stumbled upon a clearing, where stood a dilapidated house, almost swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. It was out of place, an anachronism from a different era. Vines crawled up its sides, and shattered windows stared out like vacant eyes. "This is where the compass points," Meredith murmured. They approached with caution, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a scream in the oppressive silence. The interior was no less eerie, cobwebbed chandeliers, portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them, and a cold hearth that hadn't seen a fire in decades. In the center of the main room was an altar, candles long burned out surrounding an intricately carved wooden box. Moira hesitated, then stepped forward, her fingers tracing the patterns on the box. As she lifted the lid, a rush of air filled the room, and the candles ignited in a brilliant blue flame. Inside lay a feather, pitch black, yet shimmering with an otherworldly sheen, the feather of the Raven Mocker. Moira delicately picked it up, sensing the power and malevolence it contained. "We can use this," she whispered, looking up at Meredith. "The feather combined with the Heartstone can seal away the Raven Mocker, but the ritual will not be easy." They prepared for the incantation, setting the Heartstone in the center of the room and placing the feather atop it. Moira began to chant in an ancient tongue, her voice echoing through the silent house. Meredith joined in, their voices harmonizing, the power of their intent magnified by their unity. But as the chant reached its climax, a piercing scream echoed from above, and the room was plunged into darkness. They looked up to see a massive figure, its silhouette framed by the moonlight. The Raven Mocker, in its true form, was a horrifying sight, a blend of man and beast, its eyes burning with fury. It swooped down, its talons reaching for the Heartstone, but Meredith and Moira were prepared. They channeled the combined energies of the feather and the stone, forming a protective barrier. The creature shrieked in rage, circling above, looking for a way in. The ritual continued, with Meredith and Moira's voices growing louder, their resolve stronger. The Raven Mocker, sensing its impending doom, grew increasingly desperate. It unleashed a barrage of illusions, the tormented faces of the lost villagers, memories of pain and heartbreak, aiming to break their concentration. But they pressed on, drawing upon every ounce of their strength and determination. With a final, deafening chant, a brilliant light burst forth, engulfing the room and the creature. The Raven Mocker let out a final, agonized cry before being pulled into the Heartstone, its reign of terror finally at an end. Exhausted, Meredith and Moira collapsed, the weight of their ordeal pressing down on them. The dawn's first light began to filter through the broken windows, casting the room in a warm, golden hue. They had succeeded, against insurmountable odds. The Appalachian Trail was safe once more, its dark legend sealed away. But both knew that this was just one battle won in a world filled with mysteries and dangers. Hand in hand, they stepped out into the new day, their journey only just beginning. Chapter 8. Echoes from the abyss. The dawn stretched its golden fingers across the horizon, dispelling the remnants of the night's terror. With the Raven Mocker imprisoned within the Heartstone, the Appalachian Trail seemed at peace. But Meredith and Moira were aware that peace could be fleeting. The loss of the creature might have created a vacuum, and nature, in its inherent chaos, abhors a void. A day after the intense confrontation, they ventured into the village, hoping to find it in recovery. Instead, a suffocating silence greeted them. Houses lay abandoned, doors swinging eerily on rusted hinges, and playgrounds once full of children's laughter now stood still, the swings moving slightly as if pushed by invisible hands. In the center of the village, they found a group of people, their faces pale and eyes empty. They whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing toward a dilapidated town hall. The Raven Mocker might have been a dominant terror, but something had taken root in its absence, worming its way into the village's psyche. "Where is everyone?" Meredith asked an elderly woman, her once vibrant blue eyes now clouded with confusion. "They've gone to the hall." He called them, she replied in a trembling voice, pointing to the building. Her hand, gnarled and aged, shook as she spoke. Moira and Meredith exchanged a glance before moving closer to the town hall. As they approached, they heard a melodic voice, like a siren song, pulling them in. They resisted the urge, reminding themselves that the safety of the village depended on their clarity. Inside the hall, villagers were seated in a trance-like state, eyes fixed on a tall figure at the front. Cloaked in shadow, the figure continued to weave his enchanting tale, a dark charisma emanating from him. As Meredith and Moira entered, he turned, his piercing gaze settling on them. "Ah, the vanquishers of the Raven Mocker," he began, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "Did you think the void would remain empty?" "We've come to ensure the safety of these people," Meredith countered. "Who are you?" He stepped into the light, revealing angular features, raven black hair, and eyes that seemed to contain the abyss. "Call me Lysander. In the past, the Raven Mocker and I shared territory. Now that he's gone, it's only fitting that I claim it." Meredith felt a cold anger rising within her. "We won't let you harm these people." Lysander chuckled, a sound that echoed with malice. Harm them? No. I intend to lead them. To give them purpose in a world that has forgotten them. As he spoke, the villagers began to rise, moving towards Meredith and Moira with vacant expressions. Lysander's control over them was evident. What do you want? Moira asked, trying to find a way to break his influence. Power, Lysander replied, his voice dripping with hunger. The Raven Mocker was just one of many ancient beings that roamed these lands. With him gone, I can tap into that old magic. Without warning, he lunged at Meredith, his fingers aiming for the heartstone. A powerful force pushed him back, emanating from Moira, who had started chanting an incantation. Lysander, taken aback, watched as a protective barrier formed around them. Old magic, Lysander? We've got some of our own, Moira spat defiantly. But Lysander wasn't to be deterred. He began his own chant, pulling on the energies left behind by the Raven Mocker. The town hall shuddered as two powerful forces collided, threatening to tear the very fabric of reality. Suddenly, a bright light burst forth from the heartstone, blinding everyone. When it faded, Lysander was gone. The villagers, released from his enchantment, blinked in confusion, unaware of the battle that had taken place. Moira, exhausted, leaned on Meredith. That was close. But I don't think we've seen the last of him. Meredith nodded, gazing at the now quiet village. We have to be prepared. The Raven Mocker might have been a singular terror, but Lysander represents something more insidious, the hunger for power and control. They left the town hall, determined to uncover more about Lysander and the old magic he sought. The trail ahead was fraught with danger, but they had a mission, to protect the Appalachian lands from any who threatened it. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the whisper of ancient voices filled the air, echoing tales of power, betrayal, and the eternal battle between light and darkness. The journey had only just begun. Chapter 9. The descent into shadow. The Appalachian Trail was a place of profound beauty, its natural wonders stretching out in endless, verdant waves. Yet as Meredith and Moira delved deeper into its forests, the weight of ancient magic and the pull of darker forces grew more palpable with every step. Following the altercation with Lysander, they had sought out the wisdom of a local historian, Mrs. Evelyn Harper, a woman known to have in-depth knowledge of the region's legends. Her home, nestled within the dense woods, was a repository of old books and weathered scrolls that spoke of times long gone. Seated around a heavy oak table, lit only by a flickering candle's light, Mrs. Harper unfurled an ancient map. You are dealing with forces older than memory, she began, her voice a hushed whisper. Before the settlers, before the Native Americans, there were those who walked these lands, drawing power from its very soul. Meredith leaned in, her gaze fixed on the intricate symbols that adorned the map. And Lysander? How does he fit into all of this? Mrs. Harper pointed to a section of the map, a dense forest marked with a spiraling pattern. This is the labyrinth of shadows. Legends speak of it as a gateway between worlds. Lysander, or the entity you know as Lysander, is said to be its guardian. He protects the balance, ensuring that no one force becomes too dominant. Moira frowned, but he attacked us. Tried to control the village. Mrs. Harper nodded slowly. Yes, the balance has been upset. With the Raven Mocker's demise, Lysander seeks to fill the void. The old magic that held these beings in check is waning, and he knows it. Meredith took a deep breath. What do we need to do? You must journey into the labyrinth, Mrs. Harper replied, her gaze unwavering. There, you will find the Well of Echoes. Its waters are said to possess the power to restore balance. But be warned, the labyrinth is a place of deceit and illusion. Many have entered, but few have returned. Armed with this knowledge, Meredith and Moira began their journey at dawn. The forest around the labyrinth seemed denser, the trees older, their branches intertwining like the sinewy fingers of ancient beings. Every rustle, every whisper seemed laden with intent, as if the very woods were watching them. The entrance to the labyrinth was marked by two towering stone pillars, their surfaces covered in moss and ancient runes. As they stepped between them, the world shifted. The once familiar trail twisted and turned, leading them deeper into a maze of shadows and illusions. Hours turned into days, or so it seemed. Time within the labyrinth was fluid, disorienting. They encountered visions of their past, moments of joy and pain, each more vivid than the last. At one point, Meredith found herself back in her childhood home, her mother's laughter echoing through the halls. But as she reached out, the vision shattered, leaving her standing in a darkened corridor. Moira, too, was tested. She relived her first encounter with the supernatural, a harrowing night when she faced a malevolent spirit in a forgotten crypt. But with every challenge, they grew stronger, relying on each other for support and guidance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the heart of the labyrinth. Before them lay a vast underground chamber, its walls glistening with moisture. At its center stood the Well of Echoes, its waters still and dark, reflecting a myriad of shimmering stars. Meredith approached cautiously, the heartstone pulsating in response to the well's power. Drawing a vial from her bag, she carefully filled it with the water, feeling a surge of energy as she did. Suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed through the chamber. Lysander emerged from the shadows, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Did you truly think it would be that easy?" he sneered. Moira stepped forward, her voice firm. "We've come for the water, Lysander." "Stand down." He smirked. "You may have the water, but you'll never leave this place. The labyrinth will be your tomb." A fierce battle ensued. Lysander's power, enhanced by the labyrinth, seemed insurmountable. But together, Meredith and Moira were a force to be reckoned with. With every spell and incantation, they pushed him back, the heartstone and the waters of the well amplifying their strength. In a final, desperate move, Lysander unleashed a torrent of dark energy, seeking to bury them within the labyrinth forever. But Moira, drawing from a deep well of power, countered, sending a blinding beam of light directly at him. The chamber shook with the force of their clash, and when the dust settled, Lysander was gone. All that remained was the silent Well of Echoes, its waters undisturbed. Exhausted but victorious, Meredith and Moira made their way back through the labyrinth, their path now clear. Emerging into the daylight, they knew that the battle was far from over. But with the power of the well on their side, they were one step closer to restoring balance to the Appalachian lands. We hope you have enjoyed our storytelling offering tonight. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to be alerted of future weekly additions to our collections. Paranormal Untold Stories.